I still remember the first day I felt the sickness take over me. It wasn't sudden, like a car crash or a fall. It was slow, creeping in like a shadow you don't notice until it swallows the room. At first, it was just tiredness. I told myself it was because I was getting older, because I had worked too hard for too long. But soon it became clear this was something more. My body was weak, and the smallest tasks left me exhausted. I had 3 children. To any outsider, we might have looked like a happy family. But sickness has a way of stripping away all masks and showing you people's true faces. When I grew weaker, I thought my children would stand beside me. After all, I had raised them, fed them, worked through sleepless nights to give them the best life I could. I had imagined they would return that love when I needed them most. But life rarely goes the way we dream. One evening, as I sat coughing in my bed, I called my children into the room. My voice was hoarse and my hands trembled as I spoke. "I am not well," I told them. "I may need help, at least until I recover." They exchanged looks. My eldest David cleared his throat but said nothing. My middle child Sarah checked her phone instead of looking at me. And my youngest, Sweet Lily, stepped closer and held my hand. "Don't worry, Mama," Lily said softly. "I'll take care of you." Her words were a small comfort in a room filled with silence. As days turned into weeks, my condition worsened. The doctor confirmed what I already feared: it was a serious illness, something that would take time, care, and strength to recover from. I needed help with daily tasks, cooking, cleaning, even walking around the house. Lily became my anchor. She cooked simple meals for me, helped me dress, and reminded me to take my medicine. She never once complained. But what stung my heart wasn't the illness, it was the absence of my other 2 children. David, the eldest, rarely visited. When he did, it was usually brief and filled with excuses. "Work is busy," he would say, or, "I'll come when I have more time." But days stretched into weeks, and weeks into months. His absence was louder than his presence. Sarah, on the other hand, made an appearance here and there, but she came only when she needed something: money, advice, or a place to stay when she argued with her friends. She would smile, hug me, and leave just as quickly, never once noticing the pile of dishes in the sink or the laundry Lily had folded. Sometimes, lying in bed at night, I wondered how I had raised such different children. Was it my fault? Had I given too much love to one and not enough to the others? Or did illness simply peel away the surface and reveal the truth of who they really were? The truth was bitter. One night, I overheard a conversation between David and Sarah in the living room. They thought I was asleep. "She won't last long," David whispered. "We should already think about what happens after." "I know," Sarah replied. "The house, the savings? Lily doesn't deserve everything just because she plays the good daughter. We have to make sure things are divided fairly." Their words pierced me deeper than any sickness. Here I was, still alive, still breathing, yet my children were already dividing what they thought would be left behind. I clutched my blanket and closed my eyes, forcing myself not to cry out. It was Lily who heard me crying quietly later that night. She sat beside me, brushed my hair back, and whispered, "Mama, don't listen to them. You still have me?" And she was right. As months passed, my illness forced me to see my children with new eyes. David and Sarah, the ones I thought would step up, disappeared into their own lives. They sent the occasional message, sometimes a phone call, but their absence was clear. Lily, on the other hand, was there for every doctor's visit, every sleepless night, every tear I tried to hide. She sacrificed her time, her energy, even her own dreams just to make sure I was cared for. She gave up weekends with her friends, turned down job opportunities, and carried the weight of a family that should have been shared among 3. I began to notice small things that hurt even more. When relatives visited, David and Sarah played the part of the caring children. They would bring flowers or smile for a photo, pretending to be loving and supportive. But the moment the guests left, so did they. Meanwhile, Lily stayed behind, cleaning up after the visitors, making sure I was comfortable, and holding my hand when the pain became unbearable. The sickness had changed my body, but it had also changed my heart. I saw things clearly now. The children I once thought were dependable had shown their true faces. And the one I thought was too young, too fragile, had proven to be stronger than all of them combined. There were days when I thought I might not make it, days when the pain was too heavy, and the loneliness of being abandoned by my own children pressed harder than the illness itself. But every time I looked into Lily's eyes, I found the strength to keep going. And so, the first part of my journey through sickness wasn't just about my failing health. It was about revelation. I discovered who truly loved me and who only loved what I could give them. That knowledge planted a seed in me, a seed of resolve. I would remember, and one day when the time was right, I would make sure that truth was never forgotten. When you're a mother, you believe deep in your heart that your children will stand with you no matter what. You raise them, love them, sacrifice everything for them. And when sickness knocks on your door, you think, at least I won't face it alone. But my story was different. After my illness grew worse, the distance between me and two of my children grew wider. At first, I told myself it was just bad timing. Maybe David, my eldest, really was too busy with work. Maybe Sarah, my middle child, was simply overwhelmed with her own problems. I made excuses for them the way mothers often do, because I wanted to believe they cared. But slowly, painfully, the truth became clear. They weren't busy. They weren't overwhelmed. They had simply abandoned me. David, the eldest. David had always been the one I thought I could rely on. As the eldest son, he was supposed to take responsibility, to set an example. When he was younger, he promised me he would always look after me when I grew old. I held on to those words for years, but when the time came, those promises disappeared like smoke. He visited less and less. Sometimes weeks would pass without a call. And when he finally did show up, he would sit on the edge of my bed, check his watch constantly, and leave after 10 minutes. "Sorry, Mom," he would say. "Work is just crazy right now. You understand, right?" But what I understood was this. His mother was no longer a priority. His work, his friends, his life, they mattered more. I was just an afterthought. One afternoon, I asked him if he could take me to a doctor's appointment. My voice was weak, but I tried to sound hopeful. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "Mom, can't Lily handle it?" You know she's good with these things. That was the day it hit me. My own son had decided I wasn't worth the effort. Sarah, the middle child. Sarah was different from David, but in some ways, her absence hurt even more. She had always been charming, the one who could light up a room with her smile. People loved her, and for a long time, I thought that charm would translate into love and care for her family. But Sarah's visits became rare too. She showed up only when it benefited her. "Mom, can I borrow some money? I'll pay you back soon," she would say, standing by the door, her hand already reaching out. Or, "Mom, can I stay here for a few nights? I had a fight with my roommate." She never came to sit by my side or to ask how I was really doing. Her hugs were quick, her smiles thin, and the moment she got what she wanted, she disappeared again. Sometimes she would post pictures online, laughing with her friends, traveling, living freely, while I sat alone in my room, coughing into my blanket, wishing she cared enough to stay. The crushing silence. The worst part of abandonment isn't the arguments or the fights. It's the silence. The empty chair at the dinner table. The unanswered phone calls. The text messages that say, "I'll visit soon," but never turn into reality. I would lie in bed at night, listening to the clock ticking, wondering if they ever thought about me. Wondering if they even remembered I was sick. And every time the doorbell rang, my heart would leap, thinking, maybe it's David, maybe it's Sarah. But more often than not, it was Lily coming back from the market, carrying bags in both hands, sweat on her forehead from running errands alone, pretending for the world. What made the abandonment worse was how my two absent children pretended in front of others. Whenever relatives came to visit, David and Sarah suddenly reappeared. They brought flowers, smiled sweetly, and said things like, "We're doing our best to care for Mom." They fooled everyone with their performance. But I wasn't fooled. Because the moment the guests left, so did they. The same hands that brought flowers never once lifted a spoon to help feed me. The same voices that told others they were always there for Mom never once called to ask how I was sleeping through the night. They played the role of loving children in public, but in private, they abandoned me without shame. The weight on Lily, of course, their absence meant Lily carried the weight of everything. She was still so young, but she was forced into a role that should have been shared by 3. She cooked, cleaned, managed my medicines, and still tried to keep up with her own life. I could see the tiredness in her eyes sometimes, but she never complained. Not once. She would kiss my forehead and whisper, "Don't worry, Mama, I've got you." I wanted to believe that was enough, but deep down, I felt guilty. Lily deserved to live her own life, yet here she was, carrying a burden her siblings had thrown aside. And David and Sarah? They walked free, never once feeling the weight they should have shared. The breaking point. The real breaking point came one evening when I overheard a phone call. David's voice carried from the hallway, low but clear. "Mom won't last forever," he said. "Once she's gone, we'll split everything. Don't let Lily think she deserves more just because she's been taking care of her." Sarah's laughter echoed on the other end of the line. That night, I cried harder than I had ever cried before. Not because of the sickness, I had already accepted that part, but because the children I had carried inside me, the ones I had raised with love and sacrifice, had turned me into nothing more than a possession to be divided. The truth revealed, their abandonment was no longer a mystery. They didn't just leave me alone because they were busy. They left because they didn't care. They had chosen greed, selfishness, and comfort over love, duty, and family. And I, their mother, saw them clearly for the first time. But with that painful clarity came something else. Strength. Because if they thought I was weak, powerless, and dependent, they were wrong. They had abandoned me, yes. But I was still alive, still breathing, still watching. And one day, I would make sure they regretted the choice they made. When everyone else turned away, when the house grew silent with the absence of care, it was Lily who remained. My youngest child. My gentle Lily. People often think strength belongs to the loud ones, the ones who speak the most or carry the biggest titles. But in my home, in my darkest days, strength came in the shape of my quiet daughter, the one most overlooked. Every morning, long before the sun rose, I would hear the soft creak of my bedroom door. Lily would peek in with a smile that tried to hide her worry and whisper, "Good morning, Mama. How are you feeling today?" In her hands was always a small tray, sometimes just a cup of tea and a piece of bread, other times a little fruit she had bought on her way home from school. She wasn't required to do this. She should have been sleeping, laughing with friends, or living the carefree life her brother and sister enjoyed. Instead, she chose to rise early and make sure her sick mother had something warm to start the day. When the coughing fits came at night, it was Lily who ran to fetch water, her footsteps rushing through the dark hallway. She kept a neat little box on my bedside table where she organized all my medicines, memorizing the times better than I ever could. On days when the fever burned high, she placed a cool cloth on my forehead and stayed there, whispering encouragement until the storm of illness passed. Not once did she complain. Not once did she ask, "Why me?" Her love was steady, patient, and unwavering. But what breaks me even now is how much she carried alone. She was still so young with exams, schoolwork, and dreams tugging at her. She should have been thinking of her own future, but instead, she spent her evenings checking if I had eaten or if the house was warm enough. I would often tell her, "Lily, go and rest. Go see your friends. Don't let my sickness tie you down." But she would only shake her head, smile softly, and say, "Mama, you're my friend. Where else would I go?" Those words warmed me and crushed me at the same time. Her siblings' absence only made her loyalty shine brighter. David rarely called. Sarah sent the occasional message filled with excuses. Meanwhile, Lily filled the silence with her laughter, her gentle conversations, and her small efforts to keep life normal. She played music on her phone sometimes and danced around the room just to make me smile. She told me silly stories about her classmates, dramatizing them until I couldn't help but laugh. She reminded me that even in sickness, joy still had a place in my life. One night I found her sitting by the window. She thought I was asleep. Her face looked pale with exhaustion, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. She leaned her head against the glass and whispered, "Please let Mama get better." Hearing that broke me in ways my illness never could. My child was carrying a burden too heavy for her small shoulders, and yet she bore it silently, never showing me her weakness in daylight. Her loyalty was not loud or showy. She didn't argue with David or Sarah about their absence. She didn't lash out or demand recognition. She simply kept caring, proving through her actions what true love looked like. But silence doesn't mean she didn't feel. I could see it in her eyes sometimes when her siblings suddenly reappeared for appearance's sake. She didn't say a word, but her gaze told me she knew they were pretending. She knew they came only when others might notice, not when I truly needed them. Still, she swallowed her resentment and stayed quiet, focusing on me instead of wasting energy on their selfishness. I remember one afternoon when my health took a sudden dip. My body shook, my breath turned shallow, and I thought it might be the end. Lily had an important exam that day. I begged her to go, telling her she couldn't throw her future away, but she shook her head firmly and said, "If I lose this exam, I can take it again. If I lose you, I can never get you back." That moment carved itself deep into my heart. It was not just love she showed me, but devotion beyond measure. The world never saw Lily's sacrifice. Neighbors, relatives, even her own siblings overlooked her. But I saw it. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she hid her tears, the way she gave up pieces of her own youth to hold me together. She was my unseen hero. She gave me not only medicine but hope. She reminded me daily that I still mattered, that I was worth fighting for. Without her, I might have let the sickness consume me, but for her, I fought harder. Sometimes she sat beside me in silence, her hand wrapped around mine. No words were spoken, but her presence said everything. She was there. She would not leave me. That promise lived in her eyes. A promise stronger than David's excuses and Sarah's empty words. A promise that made me believe in life again. I cannot deny that beneath her quiet loyalty lived a shadow of resentment. She never voiced it, but when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her glancing at her brother's photo with sadness, or reading Sarah's messages with a hint of disappointment. She was too kind to hate them, too gentle to confront them. But she knew the truth. They had abandoned me, and by doing so, they had abandoned her too. As my strength slowly returned, I began to realize something important. Yes, I had been betrayed by two of my children. Their absence had cut me deeply. But one loyal heart outweighed two selfish ones. One child's love became the anchor I needed. And though my family felt broken, Lily reminded me it was not beyond repair. Her loyalty became my foundation, her devotion my reason to rise each morning. When I look back now, I know without question that Lily saved me. Not just with her hands and care, but with her heart. She stood when everyone else walked away. And in that, I found the courage to live. When I finally began to get better, the house grew restless. Word spread quickly that my health was improving, and suddenly the silence of my sick room was broken. My other children, David and Sarah, reappeared as if by magic. The very ones who had been ghosts during my hardest hours now came rushing through the door with wide smiles and warm voices, pretending they had never left. "Mother, you look so much stronger," Sarah said, her arms wrapping around me. Her perfume filled the air, sweet but heavy, almost choking. "I was so worried about you." Worried? I remembered the empty weeks with no calls, no visits, no concern. I remembered lying awake at night, clutching Lily's hand while the fever burned, wondering why my other children never cared. Yet here stood Sarah, perfectly dressed, pretending her absence never happened. David wasn't far behind. "Mama," he said, bending close, "I've been praying for you every day. I knew you would recover." His voice was calm, but his eyes moved quickly around the room, landing on the cabinet where I kept important documents. I knew that look. It was the same greedy glint I had seen in his father years ago when money was mentioned. They brought flowers, gifts, and stories of how busy life had been. Sarah complained about her job, David about his new business, all excuses to cover their absence. But their sudden interest was not born of love. It was born of calculation. They had returned not for me, but for what they thought they might soon gain. I watched them closely as they filled the room with chatter. They fussed over me, adjusting pillows, offering to make tea. To an outsider, it would have looked like the perfect picture of a loving family. But I saw through them. Their movements were rehearsed, their smiles too wide, their words too sweet. It was a performance, and I was the audience. Lily, meanwhile, stayed quiet in the corner. She had no need to perform. Her loyalty had already been proven in the long nights and heavy days. She didn't fight for attention or try to outshine her siblings. She simply remained present, her calm gaze watching me, making sure I was truly comfortable. And in that moment, I realized how differently my children loved me, or pretended to love me. The tension between them was sharp, though unspoken. Sarah would glance at Lily with a look that almost asked, "Why are you sitting there so calmly?" David tried to win me over with grand promises. "When you're stronger, Mama, I'll take you to the seaside. You need fresh air, a change of scenery. I'll pay for everything." His words sounded generous, but I knew his finances were not as strong as he pretended. The truth was clear. They had smelled recovery, and the future inheritance tied to it. During my illness, when death seemed near, they had kept their distance, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because caring for me brought them no benefit. But now that I lived, now that the possibility of wills, property, and wealth grew real again, they rushed back like moths to a flame. I let them speak, let them play their parts. I answered kindly, though my heart burned with hurt. It is a strange thing to feel both joy and sorrow at once. Joy that my children had returned, sorrow that their return was not genuine. One evening, I overheard them in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. "If Mother is really better," Sarah whispered, "we should start asking about the house. She won't live forever." David's reply was low but firm. "Don't rush it. We'll play the good children for now. When the time comes, we'll make sure we get our share." Their words sliced through me sharper than any illness. My children, my own flesh and blood, were not thinking of my health, my comfort, or my happiness. They were thinking of what I would leave behind. My recovery was not a gift to them, but a delay to their greed. Lily heard it too. She came to my room later, her face pale. "Mama," she whispered, "I don't want to upset you, but David and Sarah, they don't mean what they say." Her voice shook with anger she tried to hide. "They don't love you like they should." I took her hand and held it tightly. "I know, my dear," I said softly. "I know," but even knowing the truth, I kept silent for a time. I wanted to see how far they would go with their performance. So I let them come daily, bringing food they hadn't cooked, speaking of plans they wouldn't keep. Each time they visited, I studied their eyes. And each time I saw not children longing for their mother's company, but vultures circling, waiting for a moment to strike. What they didn't know was that their absence during my sickness had already opened my eyes. I had already decided where my heart truly lay. They thought they could charm me now, erase the past with false kindness. But they were wrong. The shift in our relationship was not something dramatic, not something shouted in anger. It was quieter, colder, like a wall slowly rising between us. Their words no longer touched me. Their gifts no longer mattered. I listened politely, but in my heart I had already turned away. Still, I let them believe. I let them think they were winning me back, that their tricks were working. Sometimes Sarah would clasp my hand and say, "Mama, you know I'll always be your little girl." And David would nod in agreement, adding, "Family is everything." I smiled, nodded, and hid my true thoughts. Because I had a plan. The betrayal was not mine to carry anymore. It was theirs. And one day soon, they would discover that loyalty cannot be faked, and love cannot be bought with empty gestures. For now, I kept my silence. But inside me, the storm had already begun. When I was strong enough to walk again, The doctor declared me healthy. My body still carried the memory of sickness, but my mind was sharper than ever. I had faced death and returned, and now I saw life with new eyes. I no longer wanted to live quietly, ignoring the truths that had hurt me. I wanted to act. The time had come to settle things. For weeks, David and Sarah had continued their show of love. They visited often, bringing fruits and flowers, speaking of their plans for the future. But beneath their polite smiles, their hunger grew. They asked more questions about my property, about my savings, about the house. At first, their questions were wrapped in concern. "Mother," Sarah said one afternoon, "have you thought about what you'd like to do with the house if something happens again? Maybe it's time to prepare." I smiled faintly. "And what would you suggest?" Her eyes brightened as if she had waited for this moment. "Perhaps divide things equally now while you're healthy. That way there will be no confusion later," David chimed in quickly. "Yes, Mama, it would be wise. We want to make sure everything is smooth when the time comes." Smooth for them. They thought I was too fragile, too soft-hearted to notice their greed. But I was no longer blind. I remembered the lonely nights when only Lily sat by my bed. I remembered how her hands cooled my forehead when fever burned through me. I remembered how she whispered, "Don't leave me, Mama," while the others stayed away. That memory guided my decision. One morning, I called all 3 children to the living room. They sat across from me, curiosity on their faces. I had asked a lawyer to come as well, his briefcase neatly placed on the table. David leaned back, confident. Sarah smiled like a cat ready to pounce. Lily sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, unaware of what I had planned. "I have made a decision," I began, my voice steady. During my illness, I saw who truly cared for me. I saw who stayed and who disappeared. I cannot ignore what I witnessed. David shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's smile stiffened. I looked at Lily and my eyes softened. When I was at my weakest, Lily never left my side. She cooked for me, cleaned for me, held me when I cried. Without her, I would not be alive today. Lily's eyes widened, tears already glistening. "Mama, you don't need to say this." But I raised my hand. "I must," turning to the lawyer. I continued. "From this day forward, all my property, my savings, and this house will belong to Lily. She alone has earned my trust." The silence that followed was heavy, like a storm about to break. "What?" Sarah's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "You can't do that. We are your children too." David slammed his hand on the table. "This is unfair. We're your blood, Mama. You can't just cut us out." I met their angry stares with calm. "Blood means nothing without loyalty. When I was sick, you vanished. You didn't call, you didn't come. You only returned when you thought there might be something to gain. That is not love, it is greed." Their faces burned with shame and anger. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but not from sorrow. They were the tears of someone watching her hopes slip away. David clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," I said firmly. "The only regret I carry is trusting you for so long. But now I am free from that mistake." Lily, trembling, shook her head. "Mama, I never wanted this. I just wanted you to get better." I took her hand. "And that is exactly why you deserve it. You never expected anything. You gave me love when you thought I had nothing to offer back. That is true family." The lawyer finalized the documents, and with a firm stroke of his pen, the decision was sealed. Everything was legally transferred to Lily. David and Sarah stormed out of the house, their voices echoing in the hallway. They shouted about betrayal, about injustice, about how ungrateful I was. But I didn't chase after them. For years I had carried the weight of their indifference, convincing myself they loved me as much as I loved them. Now at last I laid that burden down. The house was quiet once more. Lily sat beside me, still in shock. "Mama, why would you give me everything?" "I don't need it." I smiled and touched her cheek. "Because love should be rewarded, not ignored. You gave without asking, and now you will never have to ask again." In that moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. My illness had been a cruel test, but it had shown me the truth about my children. And though it broke my heart, it also gave me clarity. I had chosen not with anger, but with wisdom. Weeks passed, and the storm from David and Sarah did not fade. They sent letters, some filled with pleading, others with threats. But I remained firm. The will was unshakable, the decision final. They had made their choices when they left me to suffer alone. And now, they had to live with the consequences. I often thought back to those lonely nights of sickness. At the time, I had prayed for strength, for healing, for another chance at life. Now I realized that chance had come not only for me, but for my family's future as well. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been done. I didn't hate David and Sarah. Hate would only poison what little peace I had left. But I no longer trusted them, and I no longer gave them the power to wound me. I let them go. My love now belonged fully to the one child who had truly earned it. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set, Lily beside me, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks. I had survived illness, yes, but more importantly, I had survived betrayal. And in the end, I had chosen love over greed, loyalty over lies. It was not just my recovery that mattered. It was the truth I had gained. When David and Sarah stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind them, I felt a silence fall that was louder than their shouting. For the first time in many years, the house felt clean free from the thick air of lies and empty affection. But I knew it wasn't over. People like David and Sarah didn't walk away quietly. They would fight, they would complain, they would try every trick they knew. And I was right. The very next day, Sarah came back, her eyes red, her voice trembling, but her words sharp. "Mama," she cried, "how could you do this? We're your children too. Don't you care about us?" I looked at her carefully. For a moment I wanted to believe her. But then I remembered the long nights of fever, when my body shook and my breath came short, and she never came. She had been nowhere. Now her words were not love, they were hunger. "I care about you," I said softly. "But I care more about truth. You showed me who you are when I needed you most. Now I must act on what I saw." Her tears dried quickly when she realized I wouldn't bend. She left again, her face stiff with anger. 2 days later, David came. He didn't bother with tears. He came with loud threats instead. "You're making a mistake," he said, pointing his finger at me. "The law won't allow this. I'll fight it. You'll see, I won't let Lily take everything." But I didn't flinch. "Go ahead," I told him. "The papers are signed, sealed, and legal. The law will protect Lily now, not you." For once, he had no quick reply. He stormed off, muttering under his breath. From that moment, the storm grew heavier. They began sending letters. Some begged me to reconsider. Others threatened court. They even told neighbors that I was weak in the mind, that Lily had tricked me. The gossip spread like fire, and soon people whispered when I went to the market. But I kept my head high. I had lived long enough to know gossip cannot harm a soul that walks in truth. Meanwhile, Lily stayed close. She helped me more than ever, not because of the inheritance, but because it was her nature. She often said, "Mama, I don't want your money. I only want you to feel safe and happy." I smiled at her. "And that is why you deserve it, Lily. Because you never asked for it." One night, as we sat by the fire, I thought deeply about what had happened. I realized that this was more than just about property or money. It was about justice. Life had tested my children, and only one had passed. The others had chosen selfishness over love. And though it broke my heart, I had to show them that choices bring consequences. A few weeks later, David and Sarah tried one last time. They came together, both dressed neatly, their voices soft, almost sweet. "Mama," Sarah began, "we've made mistakes. We know we should have been there for you. But we love you. Please don't cut us off forever. Can't you at least divide things equally?" David nodded, pretending to agree. "Yes, Mama, we only want fairness. Lily shouldn't get everything. We are family, after all." Their words sounded rehearsed, like actors playing a part. I looked from one to the other, my heart heavy but clear. "You speak of fairness," I said, my voice steady. But where was fairness when I lay in bed, weak and alone? Where was fairness when Lily begged you to visit me and you stayed away? Family is not measured in shares of money. Family is measured in care and loyalty and love. And on that scale, you failed. Their faces hardened. They saw I would not bend. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as my little children, but as grown people, strangers really, who had chosen their path. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, they sent more angry words, but I stopped answering. My decision was firm, and I would not let them wear me down with their endless greed. The days became quieter, calmer. Lily and I built new routines. We cooked together, tended the garden, and sometimes laughed late into the night. For the first time, I felt truly close to her, not just as mother and daughter, but as two women who had survived a storm together. And yet, in quiet moments, I did feel sorrow. I loved David and Sarah once with all my heart. To see them consumed by greed was a wound I carried every day. But I knew I could not heal them. They had to face themselves and the choices they had made. One evening, as I watched the sun dip low, I thought about revenge. Many people might see my actions as revenge cutting them out, leaving them nothing. But I didn't see it that way. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. It was simply giving them back what they had given me. Nothing. In the end, the house was filled not with shouting, not with lies, but with peace. Lily and I shared meals, shared laughter, and shared life. She no longer had to fear that her kindness would be overlooked. She knew now, without doubt, that I saw her, valued her, and trusted her. David and Sarah drifted farther away. Sometimes I heard of them through neighbors, David struggling with debts, Sarah moving from place to place. They had chased after wealth all their lives, and in the end, they lost what truly mattered. I, on the other hand, had gained more than I ever expected. My sickness had been a cruel teacher, but it had taught me the deepest truth. Love is proven in action, not in words. And when all else fades, money, property, gossip, it is only love that remains. That truth gave me peace, even in my old age. I had faced betrayal, yes, but I had also found loyalty, and that, to me, was worth more than gold. The days after David and Sarah stopped coming were strangely calm. For so long, my life had been surrounded by noise, arguments, complaints, gossip whispered around town. But when all of it fell silent, I realized what peace truly felt like. Lily and I carried on with our lives, and though part of me still grieved over my other children, a heavier part felt relieved. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, wrapped in my shawl, watching Lily sweep the yard. She hummed quietly as she worked, the same way she did when she was a little girl. I thought about how many times I had overlooked that quiet loyalty, chasing after the louder demands of her siblings. But now, it was clear. She had always been the one holding the family together. News of my decision had spread far beyond our small neighborhood. Some people pitied David and Sarah, saying I was too harsh. Others quietly admired me, though they didn't say it out loud. It didn't matter. For once, I didn't live to please the crowd. I had made my choice for myself and for Lily, and that choice gave me peace of mind. David and Sarah tried to drag the matter to court. Letters came from lawyers, filled with threats and accusations. They claimed I wasn't in my right mind, that Lily had forced me into signing away my estate. But the truth was stronger than their lies. Every document was prepared carefully, signed with my full awareness, and no judge could argue otherwise. The case dissolved before it could even begin, leaving them with more debts to pay. I thought that would be the end of it, but greed does not die easily. They tried again, this time through friends and distant relatives, begging them to talk sense into me. A cousin came by one evening saying, "They are your children, after all. How can you cut them off like strangers?" I looked her in the eye and replied, "When I was sick, I was treated like a stranger. Lily was the only one who remembered I was a mother and not a burden. That is why she will inherit. Not because I love her more, but because she loved me when it mattered most." The cousin left without a word. I noticed, too, that David and Sarah began to avoid me in public. They couldn't look me in the eye anymore. Once, Sarah passed me in the market and turned quickly away, her face red with shame. David pretended not to see me when he walked by. Perhaps deep down they knew the truth. They knew that their downfall wasn't my doing. It was their own choices that had destroyed the bond between us. Meanwhile, Lily's care continued with no change, no hesitation. She didn't suddenly treat me better because of the inheritance. She had always treated me this way, long before she knew she would inherit anything at all. That was what made the difference. One winter night, as we sat by the fireplace, I spoke to her openly. "Lily," I said, "one day I won't be here anymore. But when that day comes, I want you to remember something. This inheritance isn't a gift, it's a recognition. You earned it not with money or effort, but with love. You gave me dignity when others stripped it away. Never doubt that you are worthy." Her eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. "Mama, I don't want to think about losing you. I just want you here." I reached out and held her hand. "And that, my dear, is why you deserve everything. Because you never asked for it." After that night, I felt a deep calm settle inside me. I knew my life was nearing its end, but I also knew that I would leave with no regrets. My sickness had revealed the truth, and truth had given me strength. David and Sarah faded from my daily thoughts. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if they would ever understand what they had lost, not just money, but the chance to be part of my final years. Maybe one day they would see it clearly, or maybe they would stay blind, chasing after wealth until the end of their days. Either way, it was no longer my burden to carry. In the quiet of my home, with Lily's laughter in the kitchen and the fire warming the room, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always come through anger or punishment. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply living in peace, surrounded by love, while those who betrayed you are left to wrestle with the emptiness they created for themselves. That was my justice. Not shouting, not punishment, but truth.